Hey everyone, to continue with this month's holiday themed tutorials, we're going to be creating candy cane text. As always, if you want to read this tutorial instead of listening to my voice, it's available right now on iceflowstudios.com. The first thing we're going to do is we need to create the candy cane texture, which is going to wrap around our text. Go ahead and create a new document with the dimensions 100 by 100 pixels with a transparent background. Now, to ensure that our pattern tiles properly, go ahead and make sure that Snap is turned on under the View menu at the top. You'll see why in a moment. I'm also going to drag out a guide to find the center of my document. If you don't see your rulers on the top and the left-hand side, use your Command or Control R shortcut key, and then drag out the guide from the left-hand side. Selecting your rectangle tool from the tools bar on the left, set the color of this shape to a nice medium red, somewhere around here. Once the color is set, drag out a rectangle in the middle of your document. Now, as long as you made sure that Snap was turned on, your rectangle should snap to the middle guide when you position it. Now that the rectangle is in place, we need two more. Holding down your Alt or Option key, drag this rectangle to the edge of your document. Now, if we were to place it right here, we'd have pretty ugly results when we go to tile this pattern. So we need to place this rectangle halfway off our document. Dragging it off the edge, as long as Snap is turned on, you should see the middle of the rectangle snap to the edge of this document. That's exactly what we're looking for. When it's in place, I'm going to change the color of this rectangle to be a touch more vibrant. It's going to give us some variation to our pattern. Now, after that's complete, duplicate this rectangle over to the opposite side of your document, making sure that it snaps into place. Good, now our pattern is complete. It may look quite boring right now, but once we pop some layer styles on it, it'll spice it up a little bit. Now, to save this pattern, head up to the Edit menu at the top, and then down to Define Pattern. Go ahead and give it a name. I'm going to name it Candy Cane. Good, now we're ready to create our text. The size of the document is completely up to you. I'm going to go ahead and work with a 700 by 500 pixel document. Let's start by adding our text. With the Type tool selected, pick out your font of choice. I'm going to use a font with nice rounded edges. Poo Platter looks like a good choice, perfectly fitting for the holiday season. As for the font's color, I'm going to go with a mostly white font with a slight touch of red. Now type your word in the center of your document. The size of the font is completely up to you, but remember, you'll definitely need to tweak your layer styles in order to get the result that you're looking for different font sizes. Now that the text is ready to go, let's add our pattern. On your tools bar, grab the paint bucket tool, and then at the top, change the source from foreground to pattern. You should see a drop down appear to the right, which will give us access to the new pattern that we just created a moment ago, which should be at the bottom of this list. When you have your pattern selected, create a new layer in your Layers panel, and fill it with our new pattern by clicking anywhere inside the document. Now, there are two ways of placing our pattern inside our text. We can use layer masks, or we can use clipping. Because we're going to be rotating our pattern and possibly moving it, let's go with the clipping route. On the new layer that contains our pattern, right-click on it in the Layers panel, and then choose Create Clipping Mask. This will place our pattern inside our text. What's nice about clipping masks is that we can rotate or move our pattern even after it's been clipped. Go ahead and enter Free Transform mode with your Command or Control T shortcut, and then rotate the pattern until you're happy with it. I want to stay away from the completely vertical look. Now, some of you may be happy with this result here, a nice flat looking candy cane style text, but I'm going to go a little bit further with this design. Let's add a few layer styles, starting with our pattern. On this layer, let's start by adding a stroke to soften up the harsh edges of our pattern. Basically, I'm going to use a light red which will go around the edges of our pattern. If we leave the edges too sharp, the pattern can be quite distracting. Setting the size at 2 should do the trick. The last style we're going to add is a drop shadow. Now, we're not going to be adding this drop shadow to give our pattern some depth. We're actually going to be introducing a third color to the mix. I'm going to add a subtle green line to my pattern. You may want to turn down the opacity so the green isn't too strong. I'll pop it around 45%. Now, down below, change the distance to 6 and the size to 1. The important setting is the contour. Right now, our green line is attached to the red lines. I'd prefer if it had some separation. Changing the contour to cone should do the trick. Perfect. Our pattern is complete. Again, you're free to stop here if you're happy, but I'm going to add 2 more layer styles to my text layer, starting with a bevel and emboss. In the structure section, we're going to keep the style and technique at their default settings, but change the depth to 150 and the size to 12. Now under shading, turn off global light and then change the angle to 90 and the altitude to 70 degrees. Increase the highlight opacity to 100% and decrease the shadow opacity to 20%. This should leave you with a nice shiny looking effect. Now remember, like I mentioned earlier, if you're working with a larger or smaller font, you'll probably have to tweak the settings that we just went over to get a nice result. And finally, to pull the text away from the background, go ahead and add a drop shadow. Nothing special in terms of settings, 25% for the opacity, 90 degrees for the angle, 4 and 6 for the distance and size. And that should do it. You now, hopefully, have text that looks like a candy cane. If you want to read this tutorial or download the PSDs that we have to offer, check out iceflowstudios.com. Take care.